The most important investment that a society can make is in its people's education. We struggle when we don't have good education. We flourish when we do. It is said that a nation's destiny is shaped in its classroom, and the teacher is a key player in shaping that destiny. To be capable of carrying out such a high duty, the teacher must become aware of his or her place in society. His or her actions should reflect his or her desire to do a good job. His or her personality should represent the qualities of a good citizen. The teacher must be introduced to the concepts of equality, human dignity, rights and responsibilities, and so on, in order to pass them on to the next generation. The subject, the teacher and the community, school culture, and organizational leadership focuses on the school community relationship, which is based on the idea that the school is a product of society. As a result, the school must represent society. School community collaboration is a joint responsibility and a two-way street. The aim of this school community collaboration is to create a positive school culture. Positive school culture is a product of the interaction between internal and external education stakeholders, which is heavily affected by the leadership and management style of the school's principal or administrator. As a result, the aim of this subject is to instill in aspiring teachers a sincere desire to be professional and ethical in their interactions with students and community. These future teachers will ultimately become school leaders and administrators, so they must be prepared to lead and handle in a way that promotes a positive school culture. Let us get started with some of the introductory concepts that will be covered in this course. We have the teaching profession or the teacher, education, community, school culture, and organizational leadership. Education is a social institution that offers vital information to society's participants, such as basic data, work skills, and cultural norms and values. So one of the most significant advantages of education is that it enhances people's lives while also assisting society's smooth operation. Poverty can be alleviated by providing education, and everyone can contribute to the country's growth. An educated person is more likely to develop better moral and ethical values as compared to an uneducated person. Lack of education creates problems like superstition, domestic violence, poor health, and poor living standards. Education brings equal opportunity for both men and women, and educated people will be able to create a better society. Without good education, a better society cannot be formed. Now, what is our understanding about teaching? It has been argued elsewhere that teachers are our best and most important resource in the pursuit of better outcomes for young people. To understand this concept, let us talk about some of the most important men in history who have been teachers. Historians attest that many of the advances and breakthroughs in man's lives and ways of living have been achieved not by scientists nor artists, but by great teachers. The whole mankind owes much of what exists and are being enjoyed today from works of famous teachers. Let us start with Socrates. Socrates was born into a poor family. He was dressed in rags and walked barefoot. By profession, he was a mason and stone carver. He spoke with people on the streets and in gymnasiums, such as coach who taught others how to run and wrestle more effectively. He claimed to have taught people how to think. He did not teach with unforgettable epigrams or eloquent paragraphs, but rather with ordinary conversations. Saint Ignatius Loyola was one of his descendants, and he adopted his manners. Socrates was unattractive, but he had good manners. He had the ability to persuade even the cleverest and toughest of minds. His tactics were as follows. First, he made a humble declaration of his ignorance, which pleased the others. Second, his adaptability, which allowed him to see which side of each man he might approach. Third, his unfailing sense of humor, which enabled him to maintain a conversation. And then we have Plato. Socrates was indeed a good teacher, for he had good pupils. The greatest was Plato, who founded a college named Academy. He pursued the studies on which Socrates had launched him. He wrote books all his life, everyone in the form of conversations and dominated by Socrates. There has rarely been a finer tribute to any teacher by any pupil. He preferred to give lectures to chosen pupils rather than fall into random discussions. So he established a college rather than teaching on the streets. He was a nobleman who was wealthy and talented. He chose his audience because he believes that teaching everyone is difficult. He was the founder of what is now our examination system. He has made hundreds of good pupils through his book, which are supreme masterpieces of the teacher's art. According to him, a good education consists in giving to the body and the soul all the beauty and perfection of which they are capable. Third, we have Aristotle. Aristotle was Plato's student. He was the son of a wealthy doctor, and he had always preferred the scientific way of teaching. He studied at Plato's Academy and went on to write his own work, the Lyceum. He saw teaching and study as two sides of the same coin. He taught by encouraging his students to seek out the facts. He meticulously organized his classes to the point that his Lyceum resembled a modern research institute. He was a seasoned lecturer who explained his points with the help of people and objects in the classroom. He always wanted to show that knowledge was a constant process of discovery. He modeled this system in his lectures and books. And finally, we have Jesus. The most famous and greatest teacher of them all was Jesus of Nazareth. His teaching had two elements, both of which were vitally essential and intertwined. He educated both his own students and the Jewish people. His students were always with him, watching and imitating him, and even following him to Jerusalem. He also educated the general public in the synagogue and gave speeches in front of large audiences in the open air. They had been following him for a long time, waiting for him to say or do something. He once gave a speech to a crowd from a boat. He gave his famous speech while sitting on a hill with his students and the general public all around him at another time. According to the Gospels, his teaching methods included, first, his speeches, such as the Sermon on the Mount. It was written in 2 verses. The students clustered around him as he sat on the field, expecting him to say something unforgettable. Blessed are the modest in heart, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, he began. Then, in preparation for his mission as an instructor, he went on and voiced sentences out of his head. The term gnomic refers to a teaching method in which students are taught through the use of wise sayings. The form of his parables was well remembered by his audience. He talked as if he were a creative thinker. His another form of teaching was to utter one valuable piece of wisdom that was remembered because it perfectly articulated his character and could not have been said by someone else. They can be responses to difficult questions or solutions to problems. This technique was used by the majority of the sages at that time. He would occasionally teach a lesson by telling a story that often included a moral lesson. Let us now explore the concept of education from the viewpoints of some of the world's most illustrious Eastern and Western thinkers. Aristotle speaks of education as the creation of a sound mind in a sound body. Education, according to him, should develop the body, that is, the physical capacities of the child, and the mind, which means his intellectual, emotional, moral, and spiritual capacities. According to Nunn, education is the complete development of the individuality so that he can make an original contribution to human life to his best capacity. The individual is a sum total of various constituents, and all these must be developed. Every individual is a unique one, and as such, the task of education is to cater to the individual needs. The development should take place to the maximum possible extent. Pestalozzi defines education as the natural, harmonious, and progressive development of man's innate powers. Man is endowed with certain inborn powers and capacities, and the task of education is to bring about the development of these. Due regard should be paid in the process of education to the child's nature and needs. Undue stress should not be laid on the development of some powers of the child at the cost of others. A proper balance should be struck in the development of the various innate powers of the child. Plato said, education develops in the body and in the soul of the people all the beauty and all the perfection of which he is capable of. In the words of Dewey, education is the development of all those capacities in the individual which will enable him to control his environment and fulfill his responsibilities. According to Redden, education is the deliberate and systematic influence extended by the mature person upon the immature through instruction, discipline, and harmonious development of the physical, intellectual, aesthetic, social, and spiritual powers of the human being according to their essential hierarchy by and for the individual and social uses, and directed towards the union of the educand with the creator as the final end. The ultimate goal of life is the union of the individual with God, and this union can take place only when the various capacities of the child are developed for the good of the individual as well as that of society. Thompson says, by education, I mean the influence of the environment upon the individual and to produce a permanent change in his habits of behavior, of thoughts, and of his attitude. Environment has various aspects: physical, social, and cultural. Education should facilitate the task of adaptation of the child to his environment. Gandhi felt that while physical and intellectual development was necessary, the training of a child's heart and spirit was more important. He remarked, by education, I mean an all-round drawing out of the best in the child and man, body, mind, and spirit. Literacy is not the end of education, nor even the beginning. It is one of the means whereby man and woman can be educated. Literacy in itself is no education. This aim is in conformity with the one accepted by the Board of Education in England. Vis-a-vis, the aim of education should be to develop to the full potentialities of every child at school in accord always with the general good of the community of which he is a member. AKC Ottaway has rightly stated, education is an activity which goes on in a society, and its aims and methods depends on the nature of society in which it takes place. It follows from this that education provided within any given society will change from time to time as the society changes. It also follows not only will educational systems and institutions be different, but each society as well have its own ideal of men or cultural heroes for the young to emulate, and the development of personality will vary from one culture to another. Now, there are four important reasons for different interpretations and definitions of education. First, we have the complex nature of human personality. Second, complex nature of environment. Third, different philosophies of life. And fourth, different educational theories and practices. Nevertheless, in spite of these differences, one thing seems to be certain. Education plays an important role in molding the character and personality of an individual. It is on account of this reason that J.B. Watson, a great behaviorist psychologist, once observed, "Give me a dozen healthy infants, well informed in my own specified world to bring them up, and I'll guarantee to take any one at random and train him to become any type of specialist I might select. Doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant chief, and yes, even beggar man and thief, regardless of his talents, penchants, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and race of his ancestors." We may not entirely agree with this statement, but certainly there is great truth in it. And on account of this, educational institutions are set up for the education and training of our youth. Now, what is our understanding about teaching? It has been regarded elsewhere that teachers are our best and most important resource in the pursuit of better outcomes for young people. Education needs to aim and do more than prepare young people for the world of work. It needs to equip students with the skills they need to become active, responsible, and engaged citizens. Society and schools are inextricably linked. The schools reflect society, and society reflects the schools. That linkage contains the dynamics for improving a lot in teacher education. Education and schooling are found within the context of society. Schools operate in a social context, and any shift in educational priorities, goals, and strategies, as well as their contents, is often linked to societal changes. Society and schools are intertwined and have a two-way influence on one another. As a discipline, sociology offers ideas, concepts, and principles that help us better understand the theories and principles that influence and direct education. Education, on the other hand, trains and educates people with the requisite knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes for its continued maintenance, growth, and development through its curriculum. In 1900, John Dewey wrote in The School and Society, "A society is a number of people held together because they are working along common lines, in a common spirit, and with reference to common aims. The common needs and aims demand a growing interchange of thought and growing unity of sympathetic feelings." Notice how many times he used the word common, the root word of the word community. People of a democratic nation or society are required to be responsible, caring for others, and working together to maintain peace and equality. As a result, in a democratic classroom, students must be responsible, loving, and contributing members of the class community. They must agree to obey agreed upon laws, complete required work, and treat classmates with respect. Dr. Theodore asked the question, are we better prepared for living as adults in society if we have learned how to be part of a community? Yes, I agree that learning to be a member of a group would help prepare us for society. Even if we don't like or agree with our neighbors, being a member of a group allows you to work together. Recent studies in educational management have attempted to identify the factors that differentiate effective schools from ineffective ones. These researchers have pointed out that the best schools are those that have developed a culture which has influenced how learning takes place. This culture, which shapes the school's basic belief systems about its prime functions, what it stands for, and what the programs are all about does not happen by chance. It comes from the people within the school who have developed a collective sense of direction and a shared purpose. In this light, a key role for educational managers is the management of the organization's beliefs and values, its purpose and conception of self, in short, its culture. Schools, like any other organizations, are the collectivities of people with varied views of reality. Schools, like any other organizations, are the collectivities of people with varied views of reality. What the school is and what it becomes is determined by the people within it. Its real existence lies not in physical facilities, laboratory equipment, or financial plans, but in the hearts and minds of the people who define policies, generate structures, manipulate resources, and engage in educational activities in the pursuit of its educational ends. When these people share the same worldview about what education is, when their educational paradigms are generally consistent with each other, or when their core assumptions about education become sufficiently homogeneous, a school culture has emerged. The emergence of this culture is dependent to a large extent upon the ability of people to identify with and live the beliefs and values embodied in the school's mission statement. School culture is both formal and informal. In the formal sense, school culture is manifested in three areas. We have conceptual or verbal, second, visual, third, behavioral manifestations. The conceptual, verbal manifestations of school culture includes its aims and objectives, the curriculum, the organization's vocabulary, which divides those who belong to the organization from those who do not, metaphors, organizations, stories, heroes, and structures. That is, according to Deal and Kennedy, Deal and Kennedy noted that effective organizations have stories to tell and have heroes to emulate. These heroes personify organizational values and epitomize the strengths of the organization. Visually, school culture is reflected in its facilities and equipment, artifacts and memorabilia, crest, mottos, and uniforms. The school's facilities and equipment send particular message that is distinctively different from the one conveyed by schools with dilapidated structures. The uniform of students and faculty also provide sense of identity and is one of the most concrete visual expressions of affiliation with a particular institution. The behavioral manifestation of school culture includes rituals, ceremonies, the teaching learning process, standard operational procedures, rules and regulations, psychological and social support systems, and community interaction patterns. Rituals are effective instruments to build a spirit core, while ceremonies are celebrations of the life of an organization. The teaching learning process, on the other hand, should reflect the school's concept of learning and academic excellence. The same may be said of its standard operational procedures and rules and regulations. For instance, the way discipline problems are handled should be congruent with the school's concept of the nature of the human being. The school's community outreach programs should likewise be consonant with its definition of its role in social transformation and national development. Hargreaves, as cited by Fulan, identified four types of school cultures: fragmented individualism, balkanization, contrived collegiality, and collaborative cultures. Schools with fragmented cultures generally have employees who have no clear knowledge of the school's vision and sense of purpose. Teachers in these institutions tend to be isolated and individualistic. They have diverse loyalties with some being loyal to their principals and other bosses, some loyal to the faculty association, and still some loyal only to themselves. Balkanization in schools is manifested when various groups within operate as separate entities and often conflict with each other when major decisions have to be made. In these schools, cabals and cliques reign supreme. Schools with contrived collegiality are characterized by a set of formal, specific bureaucratic procedures. In these schools, clear job descriptions are available and decision-making processes are generally consultative and participatory. Collaborative culture was described by Hargreaves as deep, personal, and enduring, and is achieved through the extraordinary efforts of individuals within organizations. In schools with collaborative cultures, employees have a shared purpose and generally work to achieve the same. This shared purpose enables people to feel better about what they do and they tend to work harder. In these schools, teaching is not just a job, but a way of life. The most important task of a manager in shaping a culture was defined by Sang in 1990 as organizational design. He opined that the primary task of a leader is to design the governing ideas of purpose, vision, and core values by which people in an organization are to live by, and to translate these core values into policies, strategies, structures, and organizational decisions. The task of the leader is not limited to producing a document that contains lines and boxes defining the roles of people in the organization. More importantly, it entails ensuring that people have a clear concept of what their roles in the organization are and putting in place processes for the continuous improvement of strategies and policies. In addition to organizational design, leaders must also perform the role of a teacher. As a teacher, the leader helps everyone in the organization gain more insightful views of current reality. He or she helps people restructure their views of reality to enable them to see beyond the superficial conditions and events into the underlying causes of problems and thereby see new possibilities for shaping the future. School culture is an important factor that distinguished effective schools from ineffective ones. A cohesive and strong culture that is consistent with the school's mission statement does not happen by chance. In conclusion, let me quote: revolutionary change does not happen as one cataclysmic moment. We don't have to engage in grand, heroic actions to participate in the process of change. Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world. Howard Zinn.